Pew pew pew. No TikTok today, guys. No TikTok. I'm too tired. Straight up. Too tired. Not interested. Gonna full stop. Not gonna do it. Somebody I work with was complaining because today was going to be a big day for them. They were like, I got to come in and do like an open, and then I got a split shift that day because somebody had to call in sick and like all this kind of stuff. And I just said, I can come in and do the open. It's fine. It's my day off, but like, I'll come in and do the open. Right? And they were like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. That's so nice. That guy, good to see you, bud. Good to see you. And so I went in, did the open. I thought to myself, you know what, it'll be fine. I'll go in, I'll do the open, I'll come home, I'll take a nap, and then just do my regular stuff and all this. I come home, my dog is just like, you are not going to take a nap. And I'm like, but I want to. And he's like, no, that's not going to happen. And I'm like, I should take you for a walk and take the piss out of you, and then we'll take a nap. And that it just starts snowing, blizzarding. So I'm just like dealing with this like very rambunctious pug because he's got all the energy. You can hear him, right? We're playing ball right now, so I'm sorry if he gets a little. You're a good boy. Dude, why do you do that on live? You never do that to me when we're just playing normally. It's only when I'm live streaming. Why do you do that? Huh? You little scamp. Playing a little too rough, buddy. Go get it. Matthew Boucher. What's up? It's my first time making it live. How's it going? What a beautiful first comment. Kukik, good to see you back, bud. Good to see you back. We got some D. Marie. Absolute pleasure to see you. Not doing the TikTok tonight, D. Marie, so you don't need to wade into those weeds. God damn, I can't believe you did it, Marie. Honestly, like my props and respect to you. I won't. I'm still blown away by it. The TikTok to YouTube pipeline is working though. We've got some TikTokers, some people who came in from TikTok in the stream today. So it's working. It's a good strategy. It's happening. But I don't have the energy for it tonight. Dude. I can't be dealing with the dumb. It's the dumb. Although I had like a pretty... Yesterday was an interesting one because I had a pretty good conversation with someone who, in retrospect, I should have put it together while it was happening, but definitely like a Jordan Peterson fan. I think that's like... Everything that guy was saying was essentially the shit that Jordan Peterson always says. And it was interesting to see someone like that in the chat because one of the things, like, I will absolutely dump people out of the chat if they're being disrespectful or stupid. Just stupid. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody's going to say, the Nazis were defeated because of the cold, had nothing to do with the Russian military, it was just the cold. Yeah, forget about the Russian military. They didn't know what they were doing. It was the cold that did it. Yeah, bye. What was the other one somebody said just yesterday? It was the dumbest comment that was ever been said in the chat. Fascism was inspired by Marxism. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And I'm just like, Marxism inspired Italian fascism. Yeah, flush. Like we don't need to deal with that. That's like literally somebody standing up and just being like, the Earth is flat. Antarctica is the ice wall around the globe, right? Yeah. Great to see no TikTok. It's crazy when you stream it, dude. It is. The TikTok people are nuts. But like Marie came from TikTok, right? We got good people coming in from TikTok, so I like to say it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, and I know that the channel has been shadow banned on YouTube. Like I know that that's the case, and so. And if the channel is going to grow and if I'm actually going to get anywhere with this, you gotta, as my grandmother said to a young lady who was struggling to find a boyfriend, you gotta lift up your skirts and go where the boys are. So, let's start with today's news. No, that's not today's news. That's not where I want to start. Yeah, this is where I want to start. This is annoying. The Globe and Mail publishing an article, "We have to stop pretending that healthcare is entirely public." They want to privatize that from the C.D. Howe Institute, no less. They want to privatize this healthcare system so bad, dude. You can just see them frothing at the mouth. They're so desperate to get this privatization going, to make poor people pay for basic healthcare. Like, they want it so bad. They want it so bad. And I bet they'll get it. Like, we're extremely poorly organized as a people and pretty gullible. Like, we're pretty gullible people. And yeah, but it's innovation. The Prime Minister said so. The Prime Minister of Canada said that it was innovation, and so it's a good thing. Actually, you know, it'll let lines go down faster. You know, smaller surgeries will be able to get through easier. It's like, I like literally dream. I have dreams. I have dreams where we all finally organize a workers' party and start to implement nationalization and actual serious grown-up solutions, and the capitalists start crying about it, and we all go, shut up. That's my big dream. My big dream in all of this is that there will be a new wave of leaders that come and take over the halls of power, and when the capitalists complain, literally all they will say to these capitalists is, shut up. You guys are embarrassing psychopaths. Sit down. Shut up. Like, stop. We have to stop. Like, they're literally saying things like, we have to stop pretending that healthcare is entirely public. Like, they genuinely believe that they are better than us. That's what it is. That they don't consider themselves part of the public. They consider themselves to be their own little kingdom, their own little fiefdom, that just kind of pays attention to Canadians and Canadian citizens, because there's this, you know, institution that I guess technically I need to pay taxes to, I suppose, right? So, yeah, who even needs health insurance? Rusty's got it, right? John, there's a private sector solution if you don't have healthcare. It's called Don't Get Sick. Ever. Yeah, I've been living my whole life without health insurance, my whole adult life. Yeah, it's what a... Look, my strategy is to die in the climate wars. I don't know about you guys, right? I don't know about you guys. Like, it's just getting to be so obvious that our leadership is so incredibly short-sighted that... like, where do they think this is all going to go? Like, they're literally turning to people and saying, yeah, we're going to give you no opportunities. We're going to make sure that everything's horrible for you, that you're not going to be able to even, like, have basic relationships. Everything's going to be atomized and split up and separated. Like, people are going to start rebelling. Like, people are going to start rebelling really hard. Like, really, really, really hard. And eventually you're going to be dealing with a populace that literally has nothing to lose. Like, literally has nothing to lose at all. And this is, like, what they want, it seems. It just seems to me like what they want is, like, a weird little dystopic, like, Hunger Games sort of scenario. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is just going to move on, right? The rest of the world is going to be like, that sounds awful. I think we'll actually try to build a society, you know? Like, that literally, like, Russia went through a communist period, and they built, like, the Soviet blocs, and they did it very swiftly. They eliminated homelessness. China's done the same thing over a very short period of time, very swiftly. Like, it just seems to me that the trajectory of the rest of the world is actually to be like, oh, hey, if we're going to be here, then things might as well be nice. Like, things might as well be okay, right? Like, maybe not perfect. Like, obviously, we're still humans and we're still living in a flawed and strange little world, right? Did I do any research on Yugoslavia? No, I went to sleep. I went to sleep. And then I woke up, went to work, came home, tried to go to sleep again, have a dog, and then did all the research that I do for today, for the stream, and now here I am. So, maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. I do know that Chris Hedges talks about Yugoslavia quite often, because he was in Yugoslavia for its collapse. And that's like my only real frame of reference. I'll sit down, I'll do it. You watch Kukek. You'll come back, and I'll be like an expert on Yugoslavia. It'll happen. It'll happen. It doesn't take that long to get a pretty good idea of what's going on, right? Like it's you just have to do it. That's all. You just have to sit down and do it. And life's hard, man. Especially when you got these fucking frauds running everything. Like fun cat about Yugoslavia's leader. He's the only person to smoke his Cuban cigar in the White House. Yeah. Get fucked. Get fucked, White House. That's hilarious. Marie says, I really think we're going to see more and more anger, people getting more and more crazy. The pain and isolation of it all is killing us. But I don't know, maybe all old people say stuff like this. No, I think that it's like you have a combination of an older class of citizen that is like a lot of the boomers are actually going to be abandoned. Like this is the most heartbreaking part about what's going to happen, if you ask me, is that all of these conservative boomer types who have been like really grinding their heels in and trying to convince us that this system has any value whatsoever, like they're gonna go try to turn around and collect that social security check, and a lot of these guys are gonna get fucking abandoned. Like it's gonna be really, really hard to watch. And I think there is going to be a certain segment, and I'll admit, even in myself, there is like this sort of Schadenfreude sort of, well, this is what you keep voting for, like this is what you kept supporting, you kept fighting for this, like you get what you pay for kind of attitude, a kind of a cavalier, okay boomer kind of thing. But on a very, very basic human level, like we are talking about like huge sections of an elderly population that believed that they were gonna retire, that they were going to be able to like go into retirement and actually stop working and actually, you know, maybe pursue something or live a life or anything. That was sort of always the bargain that they were given. And huge segments of that population are just going to be totally fucking abandoned. And in my view, this is really where the mega cult, like the beating heart of the mega cult, are these people, are these boomer types who are heading into this situation, and they see it. They see it in front of them, that they were always told this story that you'll be able to retire, but now you can't. And they don't really know what's going on. They don't actually have a framework to understand what's happening. So all they know is something's gone wrong. And this is like your PPC, your libertarian crowd, right? And which is why I've always been very frustrated with libertarian, or not frustrated, but sympathetic rather. I've always been fairly sympathetic with the libertarian people, because the libertarians are at the very least ahead of conservatives and liberals. Like conservatives and liberals are like, things are basically okay, but we just need, you know, minor piecemeal reform, right? We can just reform the system. Sorry guys, I got a truck out here doing some clearing. It's making a lot of noise. Like liberals and conservatives are basically saying the system is fine, it just needs basic reformism, right? Like that's the best you'll ever get out of liberals and conservatives. Cotton, hello goddammit to you too, sir Cotton. I hope you're doing well out there. No TikTok today, Cotton. So it's just inside baseball today. I'm too tired for it. I suspect you are as well. Wait, what's the date? What do you mean? Sorry, Adam. What do you mean? And there are daily attacks on the TTC here in Toronto. The uptick in violence is already happening. Yeah. And so I'm quite sympathetic to libertarians, even though they're like fundamentally incorrect. Like their analysis of what is actually happening in the system is fundamentally wrong. because it has essentially funneled itself back into electoral politics. It has essentially funneled itself into fuck Trudeau, right? The problem is these liberals. Oh, these goddamn liberals, or oh, these Democrats, right? If it weren't for these Democrats or it weren't for these liberals, and then you get into that mindset of tribalism, right? My side versus their side, and then nothing that the Democrats or the liberals do it can ever have any validity or value whatsoever, or and vice versa, right? If you're a liberal, then nothing the conservatives do can ever have any value. And neither are actually like I really do think like these libertarians, man, they just need to read this Communist Manifesto and just take like one step back from the political system and finally see that, oh, these liberals and these conservatives or these Democrats and these Republicans are owned by the same people. That it's the same people who own them. They're only responding to different groups, right? And they use those different groups to create a culture war to collectively have a very robust and large cultural conversation that is full of lots of like excellent points and is very dynamic, but is ultimately safe for the capitalist class to have, right? Like critical race theory is like a fairly safe conversation for capitalists to have, right? Like, should black people be allowed to be part of the civil society? You know, like that's a fairly oh, Kukek, it's not really active right now because there's, first of all, less TikTok, but also I feel it, and I feel everyone's tired. Everyone's tired. And sometimes it's okay to be tired, you know? I can already tell today's going to turn into a bit more of an existential conversation. I can tell that for myself. Like, everyone's goddamn tired. We're all fucking goddamn tired. Danarchist, how you doing today, bud? It's just... I got it. Like, we can't be pedal to the metal 100% of the time, right? And we do have this, like what do we think the quiet quitting phenomenon is all about, right? Like, what do we think that all this stuff is all about? It really is just coming down the pipe. It really is coming down the pipe that, like, I think the thing that makes it most exhausting for everyone, that makes it most exhausting, it's safe for the capitalists, Con. Like, it's safe from a, like it's not going to mean the means of production are going to be transferred, right? Like, and I don't mean safe in terms of, like, there's not going to be violence. I mean safe in terms of I get to keep the means of production. Like, that's not on the table. That's what I mean by safe. Like, I don't mean there isn't going to be some kind of civil war or a civil conflict, which the capitalists don't care about that. That doesn't matter to them at all. What matters to the capitalists is whether or not they get to keep the means of production. And so, from that perspective, it's a safe conversation. You ever get that image in your head of a nuclear family back in the day sitting down together, turning on the radio and to listen in together, but instead they're watching you? Oh, it's the 25th, you wrote the 24th. Oh, I forgot to... Well, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. Honestly. Like, I think the thing that makes this society more exhausting than anything, it's not that we're, like, all working, right? And we are all working. Like, it used to be that one person in the household would work, and then there would be the wife and the kids and the car and that whole thing, right? And so you would be tired because you were working all the time, but you would come home and there would be energy there and there would be support and you could see that you were building something, right? And now everyone is working, right? You're working, your spouse is working, and then the kids are probably also taking on part-time work and all that kind of stuff because the whole thing is collapsing and we all see it in front of us. But I think the thing that makes it even more exhausting, the thing that adds on another layer and tips it into depression, that tips it into that depressive kind of place, is that we all know that the work that we're doing is pointless. I think that that's the hardest part. Like, I try very hard in my own life to work on what is the value of the work that I'm doing. What is it that I'm actually achieving here? And the way that I'm able to make it through each day without falling into that kind of despair is to really invest in every person that I interact with and really commit to the idea that I am here to ensure that their day improves, that I'm creating a safe, clean space with excellent quality products, excellent quality food, for them to come in with their problems and have them be released for just a little flicker of time, so that maybe there could be a place in their life that's actually nice, that's actually good to go to, right? Yeah, Kuka, welcome aboard, Kuka. Welcome aboard. Like, this is what the no TikTok stream looks like. Like, I don't have this poster behind me for nothing. And we're just scratching the surface here. Well, how you doing, buddy? Well, how you doing, buddy? Cotton, I get you. I have this weird thing where leftists have been saying that left v right is an illusion. I'm trying to understand what a good conservative policy is, if it's fake. I mean, it's hard to imagine a good conservative policy these days, because the very central plank of conservatism is that the system's working, right? And it's just like obviously false. Like, it's so obviously false now that to really believe it, you've got to really double down into like a flat earther sort of a place. Like, literally, the article I have up in front of us right now. Like, if you don't know anything else and you saw only this, 2 in 3 Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency. Like, fuck your whole society. Like, fuck your whole society. Like, if I saw an article like this that came out of China, right? 2 in 3 Chinese can't cover a $400 emergency. Like, get fucked. Like, get fucked. And we all know that all of the emergency systems that exist in America have largely been privatized. And so they're just going to watch you die. They're just going to watch you die. And there's no support system. You are on your own, right? They're literally saying things like, well, that's the responsibility of the churches. Like, that's the shit that comes out of these guys' mouths. And then you turn to the churches, and it's stuff like Joel Osteen, who literally locked his doors in the middle of a crisis so that nobody could use his church as an emergency center. Like, this is the quality of people who are at the top of the hierarchical meritocracy. And it's embarrassing. Like, more than anything else, it's embarrassing. Like, I know that my moment of death will come. I'm not afraid of that. That's fine. That maybe it'll come sooner, maybe it'll come later. Maybe I'll get cancer, the society will abandon me, and that'll be the story, right? Maybe I'll live to be 90 and die of old age. Who knows, right? But that moment is inevitable, and it's coming upon us quicker than we would like. And do people in positions of power genuinely think that as aging people get abandoned, they're just going to sit by and watch it happen? It seems to be the case more and more and more. And I'm not in despair on a personal level, because, I mean, I'm slightly less comfortable, or this is going to happen and I'm going to die and all that kind of stuff. And more and more, I'm just kind of embarrassed. I'm kind of embarrassed that I'm attached to this. That by the happenstance of my birth, I've got to be like, oh my God, like, we can't even figure out that, like, it's a bad idea to plunge young people into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt in order to just get like basic educations. Like, oh, you want to be a doctor? Well, too bad. You've got $100,000 of debt now. Like, that's very dumb. It's a very dumb way to organize a society. Like, you're just disincentivizing intelligence, which, I mean, makes sense because we worship ignorance, right? We worship ignorance in this society. We really value stupidity in this society. It's one of the core planks of it's one of the trifecta. The trifecta of worship for the decline of Western civilization is the worship of ignorance. We're so happy about it. Yeah, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than an end to capitalism. Yeah, Mark Fisher, this is the most difficult thought for me. But it's just, what's so silly to me? Like, my entire life, imaginative and creative work has been denigrated. And it's what we need more than anything else right now. Like, people are really struggling to imagine a world that looks different than capitalism. Jesus Christ, we're Luddites. Like, we're just thick barbarians. Literally just guys with sticks being like, oh, this is great. Yeah. It's another form of worshiping ignorance. That making fun of people who imagine and create and live in abstract thought and live in abstract spaces is just another way to worship ignorance. And be proud of your stupidity. That what we need to be doing is imagining new ways of living. But now it's even getting more embarrassing because we don't even need to imagine. We have models. Like the housing crisis. Like, we've got models. There are other countries that have actually solved this problem already. They've done it. Right? They just didn't use free market capitalist solutions because free market capitalism cannot provide the solution. It's just physically not possible. It's like saying 1 + 1 = potato. It's just not going to work, right? Like, the solution to solving housing is to give houses to people who do not have them. And if that collapses your stupid, dumb housing market, then good. You're not supposed to have a housing market. You're not supposed to have a housing market. Like, that's something that an absolute dim-witted moron would think. That you're supposed to have a housing market. No, you are not. No society, no structure, no anything will be able to survive if you attempt to commodify housing. Stop pretending like you can solve this problem through having a housing market and start finding solutions that will destroy the housing market because it shouldn't exist in the first place. It just should not exist. Like, imagine if you tried to create a market for air. Like, you shouldn't have that. You should not have, like, air futures. You just shouldn't have it. And the people who stand up and try to do it should be chased out of the civil society. They should have their assets stripped. They should be removed. They should not be platformed. They should literally be depowered down to the ground. They shouldn't be able to run a McDonald's if they're going to stand up and say, yeah, we're going to withhold air from people because I want to speculate on a market with it. Like, no, bye-bye. Bye-bye. We're going to put you in a hole and forget about you. And more I'm getting to that place with housing. Like, the people who are standing up, the landlords that are standing up and saying, yeah, it makes total sense that my dad bought a piece of property and now I have that piece of property because I inherited it, so I can charge $4,000 a month. Like, shut up. It's so stupid. Like, it's so dumb. To even think this way, it's so dumb. But we worship ignorance. Like, we worship ignorance. We're proud of our stupidity. We're so happy that we're dumb. And if people stand up and say we should not be dumb, we make fun of them. They're nerds. Like, Revolution is always an option. If people maybe stop protesting about useless stuff. I think the biggest problem right now, is that people still think that the system is going to respond rationally. I think that that's generally true. I think it is starting to pivot, because I think that you're starting to see more serious voices say more serious things. Like, I don't have the clip, but I saw, what's his name? Former Al Gore. Al Gore was at this World Economic Forum, and he was just spitting facts at these people. He was just straight out saying, like, when the kids see you put, like, former oil executives in these high positions, they don't take you seriously. They don't think that you're actually trying to solve this problem. They don't think you're doing your job. And they're looking at you saying, you're not going to actually do anything about this. So why should we listen to you? Why should we pay attention to you? And, like, that's Al Gore saying that at, like, the World Economic Forum. And and if you're a kid, like, if you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid and you're seeing the former Vice President Al Gore, like one of the faces of the environmental movement, saying these things, you just really start to think, like, yeah, we are being fucking abandoned. Yeah. But it's not even ironically. Like, we have the models. Like, we don't even need to imagine them. We literally are just at a place where we just need to imagine ourselves doing them. And they're not even that difficult to do. We're just caught up in the other trifecta, which is the worship of money. Right? Well, we can't solve the problem without money being involved. Yeah, we fucking certainly we can. We certainly can. We can say to money, okay, you had your usefulness, like, you're useful for certain things, but you're not useful for getting people into houses, obviously. And so we just need to stop worshiping money and stop pretending like money even needs to be involved in the situation at all, because it doesn't need to be. We can literally look at one another and say, empty house, man goes in house. And if the person who owns the 58th house says, oh, my 58th house you took from me, we say, shut up. And it's over. Like, it's over. Like, we start treating these grown-up babies like grown-up babies. And start saying to them, what you are saying is that you would prefer to sit on an empty property than actually house a person with it. And you're complaining because it's your 58th one. Like, shut up. And I'm more or less of the opinion that we should start by being nice to these guys, by being like, okay, like, you have 100 properties, we're going to take one of them, and then when they complain, we go, oh, you're complaining? Oh, we're taking all of them now. What now? What now? Like, I don't think we need to be nice to these people anyway. Have a good one, Kukik. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. Oh, that's late, bud. That's late. See you on the flip side, bud. Yeah, you're not supposed to have a housing market. It's just obvious. Like, really. It's just obvious. And anytime they try to make it work, it falls apart. Because you're just not supposed to have it. Like, it's like trying to put a fire out with gasoline. Like, you're just not supposed to do that. And it doesn't matter how much you try to work it, and it doesn't matter how much you try to game it, and it doesn't matter how much you try to figure it out. It doesn't matter how much science you put on it, doesn't matter how much thought you put on it, doesn't matter how many think tanks you have, doesn't matter how many structures you have, how many academics you have, doesn't matter how much effort and how much you put forward in it. If you're taking gas and putting it on fire, you're never going to put it out. 1 + 1 = 2. You're not supposed to have a housing market. Ever. Period. And if somebody stands up and says otherwise, they should be chased out of the civil society. Like, I should be able to impoverish people and withhold their housing so I can have money. No, bro. Like, no. Like, absolutely fucking not. And what's really embarrassing is that we actually could solve this problem, like, immediately. Like, it would take us less than a month. Like, for real, it would take us less than a month. You would come in and you would say, oh, we're capping all rent at 4% of someone's income. And that would basically do it, right? Like, it'd chase all of these investors right out of the market right away. Like, right away. All of these investors would immediately be like, oh, that's no longer a worthwhile investment. I can't speculate on that. I can't impoverish a nation and steal all the resources if I'm only going to get 4% of someone's income, right? I love it. We're so brainwashed. It's ingrained. Until you said those words, I've never challenged the notion of a housing market. Of course it's a market, obviously. Just read the Globe's business. Exactly. Yeah, just read the Globe's business section. Like, what's so crazy to me about everything that I talk about on this channel is that it's out in the open. Like, it's right out in the open. It's just never really challenged. That the debate that happens within the civil society is a debate within the confines. So, using the housing market as an example, right? The debate is strictly within the confines of the idea that the housing market should exist, that there should be a housing market. And so we have to have big, robust conversations and find solutions about how to find a way forward while maintaining the structure of the housing market itself. And we shouldn't. We simply shouldn't. And when the capitalists stand up and say, oh, well, if you get rid of the housing market, then investment will do this, that, we simply say, that's fine. Like, it is just getting to the point where the complaints of the capitalists need to be met with the same energy as okay, boomer. That it's just like, okay, like, it's over. Like, we are no longer interested in the opinions of the capitalist class. It's simply over. And when they stand up and complain, we just go, yeah, okay. And we don't attempt to explain or even argue with them anymore. Just like you wouldn't argue with a fascist when they stand up and say, we're going to execute the Jews, right? You wouldn't try to rationalize them out of it. Like I wish I had said this to the fellow last night. There's this real uptick in the argument that capitalism is a natural system, that it's by its nature it has to exist, and I didn't really realize it or remember it, I should say, until I saw this Einstein quote again. Right, the real purpose of socialism is precisely to advance beyond the predatory phase of human development. That fundamentally, what these capitalism is natural arguments are saying is that human beings cannot grow and change over time. That we actually cannot adapt. That the very thing that we actually are the best at, which is our adaptability, our ability to change, our ability to adapt. That's the reason we've gotten to where we are now, is our ability to adapt and change. That is actually not true. That capitalism is the full force, right? That capitalism is the end of history. It is the thing, and we will never grow beyond it. And it's verifiably false. It's verifiably false. The monarchists said the same thing. The chieftains said the same thing. We can never, this is natural. This structure is natural. What we're doing is natural. We can never do anything else. Until we do, and until we did. And the same thing will happen to capitalism. That we will advance beyond it. If we survive. Because unlike our advancements beyond monarchy and chieftanism and tribalism, we didn't have climate change, we didn't have nuclear war. These looming things that are absolutely... But look at how all that free labor built the pyramids and cotton fields. There is actually contradictory information coming out about the nature of how the pyramids were built. That it wasn't actually slave labor that built the pyramids. Think of the lost prophets. But what about the numbers? But what about the numbers on the screen? The numbers are the screen. That's the thing that really matters. How you doing, my little guy? Yeah, line go up. Well, I mean, the more you actually think about like the technological wonder of what the pyramids actually end up being, like you can't do this with like just whipping a guy. Like it's just not going to work out that way. Like it's extremely technical what they achieved. It's extremely technical what they achieved, right? Skilled masons, architects, engineers, all of that. Like you are talking about a fairly complex society, and one that is very clearly and obviously has its imagination captured, right? Like this is something that I think about and talk about a lot, which is like right now we are suffering a crisis of imagination. That the reason why people are feeling depressed and the reason why things feel so overwhelming and the reason why we're so crushed is because all we can imagine is our decline, and there's nothing that's showing us that we can actually build something and grow something. Like the people who built the pyramids and the society that built the pyramids were a society that had its imagination captured by the idea of building something, and building something that was powerful and wonderful, that they wanted to show not just the society that was existent today, but they wanted to show societies for all time that we understood things, we knew things, we had access to scientific principles and mathematical ideas. We were an advanced society who had made many discoveries, and we're going to prove it, not just to the Grecians that are over there, not just to the people milling about today, but in 5,000 years, people will be able to look at these structures and look at these buildings, and they will know that we understood enormous principles and had access to technologies that we have forgotten. Essentially, we have forgotten. We don't understand how they did many of the things that they did in these pyramids, and that requires to achieve something like this, to achieve what they achieved at that period of time, requires a capturing of the imagination of a people. That it's not enough to simply stand up and say, well, there was a pharaoh and he had a whip and it was all oppressive and suppressive and all that. And like, yeah, that probably existed to a certain degree. But very clearly, there was wide support amongst the populace for these projects, wide support amongst the populace for these ideas. And I actually had somebody who was talking to me about the trips that they take to France, and it got talking about the Louis, right? Louis XIV, Louis XV, right? And basically, like, Paris is gorgeous. It's a beautiful city. You think about the Louvre and all this kind of stuff. And why did all of that stuff happen? Because the people of France started to insist that this place should look nice. Like, why shouldn't this place look nice? Like, why are we tolerating these shitty shanties? We should tear this all out and build some decent architecture. We should make the place look nice, right? But here in the West, we just don't give a shit about that at all. We just don't care even a tiny little bit. We put up some gaudy concrete structure, throw the name Trump on the side of it. Oh, yeah, I'm the king. I'm the greatest. Yeah, I still doubt the saps dragging the stone from the quarries were paid labor, what I know. Well, I mean, I'm not trying to say there weren't slaves, like, for sure. Like, for sure. Like the human history is laden with it, and the system of slavery itself, for a long time in human history, was just an assumed structure that it was a class of people, that you were just a slave. Like someone bought you, like you get yourself into a situation where someone has the right, according to the society, to purchase you, and then you're that person's slave, and that's just how it is, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you were getting whipped and tortured and all this kind of shit all the time, but it put you in a class, right? It just said, yeah, this is what you are, this is who you are, right? And different societies have different rules surrounding what slavery was or is. Like, the slavery of Egypt probably was different than the slavery of cotton pickers in the Confederate South, right? So it's probably different rule set. And but the idea that you're going to end up building like highly technical architectural structures, like with a slave class, it's just not serious. It's just not a thing that probably happened. Yeah, Egyptologists have uncovered more about the pyramid builders' lives. They were given housing and food. Yeah, they got holidays. Well, it's what the Confederates always said, right? It's what the Confederates always said, right? The Confederates always said that chattel slavery was a more moral form of slavery. Like, even the chattel slavers who was like, yeah, slavery's not moral, but it's better than wage slavery. And their argument was always that chattel slaves had to be taken care of. You had to house them, right? When the work was over and there was a down season, you still had to house them. They were your property. You had to take care of them, right? You had to feed them. You had to give them lodging and shelter, right? This was the argument of the Confederates in the South on the lead up to the Civil War. There's a really great book, Cotton is King. I highly advise everybody read it, because it's a series of essays written by the pro-slavers on the lead up to the Civil War. And it's not necessarily, there is a Bible prescribed slavery within Cotton is King. That is definitely part of it, but there were many different arguments, right? Like the economics argument, just the straight up, like, look how much money we're making. Like, you want to get rid of this system? Look how much money we're making with it, right? And they go into very painful detail, like painstaking detail, to show that this is the case. And the reason why the name of the essay collections is Cotton is King is because cotton is king. Like, and they go and they tell you how much money they're making with cotton, right? And one of the arguments, it was a non-religious based argument, was very straightforwardly, the Northerners are trying to replace chattel slavery with wage slavery. That they called the system that we currently live under wage slavery. Abraham Lincoln called the system we live under wage slavery. He actually ran as a platform on the abolition of wage slavery, and was unable to do so because he had to fight the Civil War. And the argument was very straightforward. We have to house, chattel slaves are housed and fed even when there's no work to do, whereas wage slaves are abandoned when there's no work to do. You lay them off, you throw them out, you tell them to go deal with it themselves, right? Which has given rise to this hyper-individualist mindset within the capitalist ethos, that, well, you got to grind set and work it out. It's up to you. The third of the trifecta of the decline of capital is the worship of the individual. It was the argument of the founding fathers in the United States around slavery. Did the founding fathers themselves actually say what I just said? I wouldn't be surprised. The more I find out about these guys, the more I'm just like, these guys were fucking maniacs. Like, literally just kings who were able to if it wasn't for the colonial period, they would just be continuing the legacy of war within Europe, right? That's the legacy of Europe, just constantly at war with itself. Economics is a red herring, of course. Just like pro-life, you're either pro-choice or anti-choice. I mean, Old Testament slavery was no better than American slavery. By my estimation, Old Testament slavery was probably better than American slavery. Like, American slavery is a particularly brutal form, right? It's a particularly brutal form. Like, there's lots of evidence to show that ancient systems of slavery, like, they were just existing as an economic model. It's just like a class of citizen, right? That slaves were not by their very nature dehumanized, right? That it was just sort of understood that they were in this strata and they were in this class and that it was an organizational structure. It's not to say that it's the greatest structure that ever existed, and I'm not defending it by any stretch of the imagination. But it's the element of racism and dehumanization that I think is attached to American slavery that makes it very special, in my view. That, like, slavery in, like, ancient Egypt. I think one of the other things that's really interesting about many ancient slave systems is that the slave moment was largely temporary. That it was something you, like, sold yourself to be a slave for a period of time, or you could buy your way out of it. Whereas in American slavery, none of that existed. Like, you literally were just rounded up and you were a piece of property. Yeah. You can't beat a slave to the point of an enslaved person can work. American slaves. Oh my God. I just simply don't want to talk about this anymore. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, it's too much. And it's so fucked up that people come in here and are like, slavery always existed. Capitalism was normal. Capitalism was normal. Slavery's always existed. It's like, just like the slavery apologencia, right? Yeah, the Ukraine tank saga. I do have an article here from Rainer, and I like Rainer Shea's stuff. The U.S. empire's Ukraine miscalculation could bring revolution if we expose its lies about the war. I mean, you can include Libya on this map for sure. In The Myth of Capitalism, Michael Parenti said, you know it's going to be good when you start with a Michael Parenti quote, right? No ruling class rules nakedly. They take strenuous efforts to justify their rule. I tell students when they say, oh, they don't care what we think, they ignore us and all that, and I say, oh, no, that's the only thing they care about you. The only thing they care about you is what you're thinking. They don't care if you eat correctly. They don't care how your living conditions are. They don't care that they've built up an inhuman and irrational traffic system that's strangulating us and polluting our air. They don't care about anything. The only thing about you they care about is what you're thinking. In the morning they start, what's going to be the story today? How do we manipulate? How do we control? How do we contain? How do we influence? How do we act upon what it is that they have in their minds? This potential that the narrative battle has to change history is known by both sides in today's geopolitical competition between imperial powers and the powers challenging U.S. hegemony. The Communist Party of China stated in 2021 that the Central Committee has made it clear that the failure in the cyberspace domain will spell disaster for the party's long-term governance. The party therefore attaches great importance to the internet as the main arena, battleground, and front line of the ideological struggle. This risk that online anti-Chinese disinformation has to undo the revolution's gains is why the imperialists have put so much effort into propagating these lies and into trying to get anti-communist content to bypass the Great Chinese Firewall. The vulnerability goes two ways. The imperialist governments are also in potential peril due to the power that the internet has to sway public sentiment. With Washington's strategic gamble in Ukraine, this informational threat towards imperialism has magnified. U.S. imperialism has created an unprecedented danger for its global strategic success, and therefore for the survival of its core state, by making the perceived credibility of NATO dependent on three factors: Ukraine's victory, the success of the sanctions to the degree that Russia gets destabilized, and the victory of the narrative that Russia's intervention was unprovoked. These committed to pro-imperialist ideology will never recognize that Russia was in fact provoked, or that its intervention is being carried out foremost to advance anti-fascism. But to the observers who aren't biased in favor of the empire, it became common knowledge months ago that victory for the Ukrainians is now logistically impossible. By the fall of last year, when Russia had only used around a fifth of its potential military capacity in contrast to a Ukraine so desperate for manpower that it was freeing sexual predators to fight, Russia had already made inevitable the fulfillment of its strategic objective, the demilitarization of Ukraine. It made this inevitable by rendering Kiev utterly dependent on foreign aid in order to keep fighting. And the longer the war continues, the more thorough Kiev's exhaustion becomes. The imperialists knew from the start that such an outcome would come if Russia decided to take on Ukraine. Washington's provoking Moscow was foremost about weakening Russia enough that it would collapse and become able to be broken up like Yugoslavia, so that China could then be subdued. If Washington had won the economic war and brought about this scenario of Eurasian collapse, he would be able to claim victory in the war, despite Ukraine having been successfully demilitarized. That's what the imperialist media has been trying to do by putting out headlines proclaiming that Russia has already lost the war, with the argument being that no matter what, Russia will still be recolonized by the empire. But it won't be recolonized, so that argument will never be proven right by tangible reality. The imperialists will have to invent an alternate reality where they've won, which is many won't be willing to believe, when actual events so obviously contradict what the imperialists have said. There's inevitably a consciousness shift towards distrust of the empire. That's what happened when the Americans were exposed as war crime perpetrators in Vietnam, and when the promise of a cakewalk intervention in Iraq was followed by a decades-long war. This isn't the first time imperialism's propaganda has been discredited. From the Spanish-American War to the Gulf War to Libya to Syria, there have been moments when Washington's assertions get shown to lack substantiation. Being an empire, and therefore by definition a power which wages wars for profit rather than defense or humanitarian need, it's inevitable that it gets routinely caught in these lies. The strategy the empire has used to prevent these lies from bringing revolution in the core, fatally extensive international loss of support for the U.S., or both, is the standard public relations model of making society forget about the damaging information. Imperialism's narrative managers have censored the facts revealing the lies, while creating new accusations against the targeted countries to distract from how the previous accusations were debunked. There's a limit to the effectiveness of this diversionary practice. Those most willing to forget about Washington's lies and atrocities are now the ones who have a material stake in maintaining imperial extraction, and that means most of the world has always been perpetually on the verge of turning against the empire. It was unavoidable that at some point the balance that U.S. hegemony depends on would be lost, and an unprecedented global trend towards anti-Americanism would appear. This irrecoverable decline in an international respect for Washington started with the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and has accelerated with Washington's Ukraine proxy war. Most of the world responded to Bush's crimes by coming to no longer view the U.S. as a worthy global leader, and that's been shown in the last year when almost no peripheral countries have participated in the Russian sanctions. Bitter U.S. officials have signaled they interpret this as these countries siding against Washington, and they're right. Like was the case in 2019, when Washington tried to isolate Venezuela by asking the world to recognize its fictitious new coup government, Washington has instead isolated itself. Who's been saying that all this time? The only countries which are usually willing to aid U.S. imperial schemes are the other countries that benefit from neocolonialism, and even they are increasingly threatening to break from Washington's rules-based international order, simply out of practical self-interest. The cost of the sanctions are so severe that even after the unification and expansion which the Ukrainian conflict has brought to NATO, the European countries are now newly divided due to how much destruction this economic war is bringing upon them. This increasingly threatens to turn into a new inter-imperial rivalry, which, as Stalin observed, inevitably leads to the mutual weakening of the imperialists, the heightening of capitalist contradictions as war harms working people's interests, and the practical necessity of proletarian revolution. Due to the decision by most of the world to challenge imperialism, it's now inevitable that multipolarity will continue to emerge, and that the U.S. empire will continue to weaken. Yet this on its own doesn't guarantee revolution in the imperial center. This is because, whereas the empire's psyops are in the process of failing across the peripheral countries, to the consequence that the imperial powers are isolated in fighting the new Cold War, the psyops haven't experienced this failure within the core itself, at least not yet. If we work to expose the lies behind the Ukraine psyop and behind the other psyops used to justify Washington's geopolitical maneuvers, the state within the core will be the one which experiences a fatal disruption in its task of maintaining social control. At the same time, the PRC and other countries challenging Washington will keep becoming more fortified against imperialism's desperate destabilization schemes. Always a pleasure to read Rainer, man. Always a pleasure. Yeah, you guys are talking about the tanks that are being sent to Ukraine. I gotta be straight with you. I don't think that that's very serious. Like, I really don't. Like, I think that it's like a last gasp of a military industrial complex who's trying to funnel as many weapons into the situation as they possibly can. But even the United States is now starting to acknowledge, right? We've got it all wrong, warns U.S.-based Center for Strategic and International Studies after carrying out war game simulations that shows U.S. will exhaust its munitions, including long-range precision-guided weapons, in less than a week with a war with China in the Taiwan Strait. According to the report, military aid to Ukraine is laying a heavy toll on U.S. military, depleting the arms stockpiles of Department of Defense, with reports also warning Washington's millennial soldiers are too weak to fight. Looks like in a possible war with its arch foe, U.S. will be getting a kick in the vagina. A bit crass, but the absolute truth. That the Europeans are not going to be able to wage a significant push, and that all of these signals, all of these threats in regards to building weapons and sending them to Ukraine, they're not very serious. They're just a way to funnel money up to the Tony Starks of the world, to the arms dealers, right? Like, it is alarming that they're building these weapons and that these weapons are going out to be used. Like, that is certainly the case. But there's simply no evidence of a major offensive against Russia. That Russia has ostensibly won this war, right? That now it's just this grinding meat grinder of death and destruction. It's very unlikely that these tanks are going to be fielded and have a very significant impact. Like, it's just sure, it's scary from a like, wow, Germany is scary, and it's scary that Germany is building a military force and sending it across Europe and all that. Like, it has kind of a like Fourth Reich sort of a sense about it. But like, in terms of like it escalating into a more major and significant conflict, like, you simply take a look at where the battle lines are being drawn. I just watched something about this, so it's a bit fresh in my mind. The major battlegrounds that are happening in Ukraine, come on, John, you know where Ukraine is, Jesus Christ, is this river, right? That where the Ukrainians have been trying to seek gains the most is in this territory here. For fairly clear reasons. It's the furthest away from the supply chains. It's the furthest away from the supply lines, right? And they keep trying to send boats, and they keep trying to go across the Dnipro River. They've even blocked some of the dams along the river in order to try to lower the water level to make the crossing easier. But the Russians have been repelling it the entire time. And it looks like the attacks are getting more and more desperate, which is what happens when people start to lose war. Like, when the side that's losing knows that it's losing, the attacks become more and more desperate. But they're not effective. They're not actually gaining territory. They're not actually claiming territory. They're not achieving anything. And I said it right at the beginning of this whole conflict. You can send what you want. You can send tanks, you can send missiles, you can send what you want, but what you need is people. That's what you really need. You need military boots on the ground. And when Russia mobilized like 300 to 200,000 men, that really was the end of the war. Like, sure, there was criticism about how well trained they were, blah, blah, or the conditions and so on and so forth. But like, if someone is marching 200,000 men into a war and you're not, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. I don't care how many attack helicopters you have. I don't care how many tanks you have. I don't give a shit. They've got 200,000 men. Like, that's the actual story of this war. And you'll notice, like, it's not very well reported, but the Russians essentially seized this territory, right? Just swoop right here. The Donbass region, Donetsk, Luhansk, all of this, it's all been seized, and they've basically drawn the line. They seem satisfied with the territory they've claimed. There doesn't seem to be any narrative of Russia going in and seizing Kiev or any of that kind of stuff, right? Doesn't seem to be coming out of the Kremlin that's actually what they're interested in doing. And they're just holding the line and basically saying, there it is, we've got it, we did it. We achieved our objectives. Like, the Russians are basically saying it's over, like, we won. Like, it's just whether or not the Ukrainians are going to put down their arms or not. But in the meantime, Ukraine itself, internally, is falling prey to overt neo-Nazis. That recently Zelensky banned the East Orthodox Church, which is a church that the nationalists, the Nazis, have been trying to go after for a long, long time. Right? So the Nazis are taking over Ukraine internally. And the whole thing is collapsing into a fascist state, which is leading the rest of Europe. Like, when you go outside of Germany, you go into places like Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, to be a bit like, why are we supporting this? Why are we supporting this when the Ukrainian government is actually doing like very overt Nazi demonstrations, like forcing people who come to the Orthodox churches to like sing Nazi anthems and stuff instead of do their prayers. Like this is the normal society that we here in the West are actually starting to defend, and it's actually starting to make certain NATO members, like Turkey, this whole situation is starting to make Turkey talk about pulling out of NATO. Because they're looking at NATO being like, oh shit, like you guys are you're literally funding neo-Nazis. Like that's happening. And it's quite shocking. Like I've been talking about it this whole time, right? I don't get to talk about it when we do a TikTok stream because TikTok bans me for doing it, right? And I assume that eventually this whole thing, like channels like this will get scrubbed right off the internet, right? But Rainer Shea is completely correct. That we need to be talking fairly openly about the reality that NATO openly was funding neo-Nazi groups, openly did a neo-Nazi coup in Ukraine, overthrew the elected government, and then immediately started a war with the help of Nazis in the Donbass region. Like, that's what they did. And the Russians came in and ended it. And then the Nazis essentially take over Ukraine, and the whole thing is collapsing into a neo-Nazi fascist state in a very overt and obvious and very straightforward way. And most of the NATO nations are turning a blind eye to it. Will they forever? Like, if I'm Moldova, which isn't a NATO nation, but if I'm Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, even Poland, and honestly, how long is it until these nations are going to start to say to themselves, man, we could peel a piece of this off. We could just say that Orban in Hungary could just be like, the city of Erzhad and Muschefo, right? Like, this whole territory right here, this border right here, this is part of Hungary now. Yeah, back in 1653 or whatever, it was part of Hungary. It's old Hungarian territory, and so we're gonna say that this is part, and we're gonna go in there. We're gonna protect these people from the fascist state that has arisen in the midst of this war. Like it could all go down that way. The Romanians could start peeling off territory. The Moldovians can go in and start peeling off territory. The Polish have been this entire time. The Polish have been talking about going into this region since the beginning. Have been talking about this, and the reason why I'm talking about this more and more is that it looks as though the Kremlin and certain ministers within the Kremlin, I forget, of course, who offhand, but they've been talking fairly openly about this possibility, and it sounds more and more that, should these nations actually do that, Russia's position is, we're not going to stop you. We're not going to say that you can't. We're not going to put up a fuss about it. Right? So how much longer until something like that actually starts to happen? And like, I don't think that Ukraine is going to make it. Like, I don't think it's going to make it through this. I think that this is going to get broken up. The way that Yugoslavia was broken up. That Russia, this is going to become part of Russia, and other nations are going to start peeling it apart. And the question really is, who gets what? But what's certainly the case, if you ask me, is that Kiev is going to be a neo-Nazi fascist state. Because that's essentially what it's devolved into. That its little puppet leader, Zelensky, will eventually be deposed, and they will eventually take power, and you will get exactly what I've been calling this entire time. You will get open neo-Nazi salutes, in the parliament. You will get them openly talking about being Nazis and how great it is to be a Nazi in Kiev, in the parliament, before this is all said and done. It for sure will happen. And no amount of hardware they send these guys is going to stop that from happening, because they just don't have the manpower anymore. Right? The Ukrainian forces have been depleted. NATO can send weapons and stuff, but they're not sending men, because no one wants to go off and die in this godless war. And the foreign fighters who were stupid enough to go over there either realized immediately that it was a Nazi state and left, or died. Yeah, huge government shakeup in Ukraine as well, for sure. Ukraine is asking for war-winning levels of support. Yeah, they're dreaming of the 2,000 or so Leopard 2 tanks in Europe. I mean, look, I just don't think it matters that much. Send them. Like, send them. Like, Russia has air superiority. Do the Ukrainians even know how to use these tanks? Like, do they even have the men to operate these tanks properly? Do they have enough bullets? Like, we're literally seeing reports coming out of people saying, yeah, if we started a war with China, we'd be out of munitions in a week. Like, so you got the tanks. Do you have the bullets? Like, do you have the shells? Probably not. Probably not. Meanwhile, Russia's gotten reconnected with China. Russia's gotten into the BRICS organization. Russia's part of the Belt and Road Initiative. They've got a supply chain for days. For days and days and days and days and days and days and days. And because this is an existential threat for Russia, because it's happening on their border, because they're going to war against a neo-Nazi threat, and they have a long history of fighting Nazis. When they stand up and say, we need 200 to 300,000 men and we're going to recruit them, they show up. They actually come. They're not happy about it, obviously, but they come. And the truth is let's say these tanks are effective and they actually start pushing in and all that kind of stuff. What, you think they're not going to start mobilizing more? Like, Ukraine can't mobilize any more men. The men who are mobilized have been mobilized. They can't mobilize anybody else. NATO's mobilizing no one. Right? The German chancellor is not going to stand up and say we need 100,000 men, and 100,000 men are going to show up to go die in Ukraine. That's not happening. And it's not going to happen in America either. Like, can you imagine if they tried? Like, you want to talk about what's going to kick off a revolution? Like, yeah, a draft. A draft would probably do it. Right? Oh, hey, we're going to impoverish you, destroy your prospects for the future, forget about climate change and all that, but can you go die in this pointless war? Nah. Like, nah, brah. Like, nah. That's not going to happen. And so the war is over. Right? It's just whether or not the West wants to go psychopathic and annihilate human life or not. Like, do they want to start dropping nukes or not? And it's always the story. Like, anytime, like, anybody, like, Germany sends tanks, Canada sends APCs, all this kind of stuff, let them. So what? It's not going to matter. Like, you think that the Russians don't, like, see these tanks coming and then are just like, oh, like, what? You think that they're not, like, tracking? Let them roll these tanks up. Like, what a great target. What an easy thing to hit with a missile. Like, I don't want to talk about slavery. I just don't want to do it. It's just like getting in. getting into the intricacies of an absolute horror show. Every Russian battalion probably has a couple hundred very effective anti-tank missiles. One soldier can take out a whole tank. Ukraine only has one option remaining: diplomacy. Yeah, and I don't think they're going to do it. Like, fascists are not well known for surrendering or doing diplomacy, right? They don't want to take the knee. They're and because a lot of these fascists know what comes next. Like a lot of these Nazis know what happens after this, right? Russia's not just going to be like, oh well, you're Nazis, go live your life, right? Like they're going to have tribunals. Like I've been talking about that the whole time. China can't sustain a war in any capacity. The Americans disagree with you. Like the military who are actually studying the issue disagree with you. So there's the end of that. If the international community imposed sanctions, that's not serious, Marcus. Like the quote unquote international community. Let's take a look at it. Like let's take a look at the quote unquote international community, right? It's the same story about why the sanctions in Russia don't really matter, right? Well, I mean, they matter, obviously, but they don't matter as much as the West wants it to matter, because the quote-unquote international community and the quote-unquote international rules-based order has always been the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia, right? Like a couple of different, like sometimes Mexico, if it's convenient, and then like little tiny states here and there, like Israel and this sort of stuff. But broadly speaking, United States, Canada, Australia, Europe. That's the quote-unquote international community. And for a while, that was fine, because those were the countries that had all the money and the power and the bombs and all of that. So putting a sanction on a place was actually serious, right? But put sanctions on China, first of all, you're collapsing the American economy instantaneously, right? China makes all our stuff. Right? Like we don't have an industrial base anymore. We deindustrialized throughout the 80s and 90s. We took our industrial manufacturing base and we gave it to who? China. Right? China makes all our stuff. So if we are to go to war with China, immediately all of the goods that we have instantaneously dry up. And that happens instantly. Literally, China just stops shipping us stuff. And that's the end of that conversation. So a war with China means immediately an enormous economic crisis for America, instantaneously. Huge supply chain disruptions, enormous disruptions in basic goods. Meanwhile, and this is something I find very common with people who say the kind of thing that you just said. Meanwhile, China has the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Like, this is a railway system, and this is an old picture. I need to find a better system, or a better picture, rather. This is a rail system that China has been building since 2009. As you can see, it goes up into Russia, throughout the Middle East. They're trying to get it into Africa through Saudi Arabia. And the goal, of course, is to basically sidestep these sanctions. To basically say, oh, you're going to sanction us? Well, we don't really care. And you've got Brazil, Venezuela, other Latin American states, African nations, many of the nations throughout the Middle East, Russia, India, right? The BRICS organization exists. Like, if the United States puts sanctions on China, China will pivot to its other partners, right? And America doesn't really have anywhere to go. So if they attempted to put a sanction regime on China, China would, obviously there would be an effect, but the real victim of it would be America itself. So this idea that the international community is going to put sanctions on China and that's going to mean the end of China, it's like, no, boy, no. And you can see the precursor of that happen with Russia. Like the quote-unquote international sanctions did not hurt Russia at all. Like, sure, they had a little dip for a second because everybody was like, oh, fuck, is it going to matter? And then it didn't matter. Why? Because Russia kept trading with Russia. Russia kept trading with China. It just kept plunking along. It just kept on trading with China, kept on trading with India, kept doing what it was doing, and made the pivot. And so if the sanctions didn't cripple Russia, what makes you think they're going to have any effect on China? Like, and again, it's very much worth restating. America doesn't have an industrial base. They don't make things. Like, they don't actually do stuff. And so should they actually attempt to sanction the people who are making things, well, who's the loser there? Here's an idea. Let's give Western Ukraine to Poland and Moldavia and Eastern Ukraine to the residents. I don't think it's about giving. I think it is going to be fought over. Some say Russians are quietly enlisting more recruits. I wouldn't be very surprised to find out, dude, that, like, the average Russian citizen is training up. Like, it's very serious what's happening on their border. Like, that's something I think Westerners really, really don't want to admit. That, like, what is actually happening on the Russian border is fucking serious. And, like, we're a bunch of fucking fat-ass burger eaters. Like, we're not training to go to fucking war and shit. Like, we're not doing any of that. Like, the scariest people in the United States are, like, the neo-Nazi groups I was reading about yesterday, right? The MMA guys, who are essentially just, like, cosplaying as fascists. Like, yeah, thank goodness for inside baseball, yeah. If Polish troops fight Russian troops outside the Donbass, would it trigger Article 5? But this is why I think Russia wouldn't involve itself. Right? That officially Russia would always say we were not involved in that. Because Russia has achieved its war goals. To me, this is the number one reason why Russia is like, we got the territory that we stated that we wanted, and we're not moving outside of it. So that they can always say, this is the territory, this is what we've done everything according to the letter of the law, according to the rules of warfare that exist amongst the international community. We're not going to step outside of that. We're not going to suddenly charge towards Kiev because things could get messy. Things could get messy pretty fast. So I think they're always going to say, if there was a conflict between Polish and Russian troops, they're always going to say, nope, rogue group, we had nothing to do with it. We didn't make those orders. I'm still convinced that the West would accept a nuclear war if they would end up on top. Russia is significantly more capable of producing food and energy. The Russian economy is far more capable of being insulated. The American economy and generally the world economy collapses, but China starves within 2 months. I think you're really underestimating China, dude. Like, really, really underestimating it. Like, and very specifically, I think you're underestimating China's trade networks, China's relations that it's built. Like, it's sort of a weird position, frankly, to say that China is just going to starve. Probably not. Like, probably not. Like, I feel like you watched that neoliberal shill on Joe Rogan and thought that anything he had to say was interesting. Like, it's just not going to go down that way. And if they do have like food shortage or food tightening, then they'll do rationing and they'll work it out, right? Because they're a rational culture that actually knows how to do communication. They're not going to have a freedom convoy movement or something, right? Like, that they actually understand, like, oh, times are tight, we've got to tighten up, and we're going to make sure the citizenry is taken care of. And they're going to do that kind of stuff. Like, whereas we are going to do things like monopolize markets and hoard resources and do all that kind of stuff like this neoliberal shill on Joe Rogan talks about, right? Like, that's just not going to happen in China. They're going to make sure that they can feed their people. And, like, what, you think that the Russians are just going to stand by and watch the Chinese starve and not be like, oh, like, let's ship some grain, let's get some shit in there, right? Like, you think other nations, like, this is like the crux of your entire argument is that China, once sanctioned, is the borders are closed and China is alone. And it's just not even close to the case. Like, not even remotely close. That's what these neoliberal hacks refuse to actually talk about. Because if they actually started to talk about how well China is doing on the world stage diplomatically, it would raise a lot of questions, I think, for people. I think people would start to be like, oh yeah, why are people actually liking China and building organizations with China and actually attempting to work with China instead of us? Right? Like, I just don't really take your position very seriously, and nor do I take the position of that guy who went on Joe Rogan very seriously and talked about China, because he's illiterate and frankly stupid. Like, just frankly just stupid. I'm convinced the West would love to see a genocide by starvation and point the blame at the Chinese leadership. I mean, yeah, they basically manufactured genocide narratives all the time, so of course they would love to see a real one. It's just not going to actually go down that way. Like, it's just not how it's going to go. Because very straight up, China has built a network of trade relations that benefit all parties. It's not the type of trade that the United States does, where they go in, point a gun at your head, and say, "Dig up this shit, and we'll take it." Right? Like, they're actually helping to build infrastructure, helping to develop a nation, helping to what they call win-win diplomacy, right? And should the United States do what the United States always does and try to isolate China, it's just not going to work. Like, there is an international organization called BRICS, which is primarily China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and India, that already exists. It's already a trade alliance that exists that Westerners never talk about or discuss. And it's a significant trade organization that exists specifically to prevent the very thing that you're talking about. And it's extremely important for the Western propaganda machine to never actually discuss it, because they want to be able to say, "Oh, we're sanctioning them and that's serious." But it isn't. Like, I mean, it's serious, but it's not like the Chinese are not going to starve. And like, the idea that the Chinese Communist Party is sitting there going, "Oh my God, we're going to starve in 2 months if sanctions happen." Like, well, you think they don't have a solution for this? You think they aren't, like, making a plan? You think they aren't looking at that as a possibility and thinking to themselves, we gotta actually do something about that. Like, that's a serious and significant threat that we gotta take care of. Like, it just seems to be, like, if you're talking about it, dude, they're talking about it. I don't see any way that people could justify China invading Taiwan, and that would be NATO's wet dream. I'll give you the narrative right now, dude. The only reason Taiwan is not officially part of China 100%, like completely and totally, is because of United States imperialism. That during Mao's revolution, during the Maoist period, Mao tried on several occasions to get to Taiwan. It's where the ruling class of China lived, right? So the kings and queens of China, if you want to use that language, lived on Taiwan and ruled from Taiwan. And Mao tried to get to Taiwan, and who stopped him? Truman, right? The Americans. The Americans stopped him from getting there. They got in the way. So in the most technical of senses, this is actually a war that never ended, right? Now, in the 60s, Nixon helped smooth this all over. He visited China. He acknowledged China's position on Taiwan. China's official position on Taiwan is one country, two systems. That's their official position on Taiwan. He acknowledged that Taiwan is part of China, right? And that was the position of the United States from Nixon up until literally the Biden administration. And what parallels with North and South Korea? Like, what the United States did in North and South Korea was barbarism. Like, just outright barbarism. Like, they went into North Korea and leveled it to the ground. They killed, like, 20% of the population, blew up 80% of the buildings. Like, what parallel exists there? If there is a parallel discussion to be had between China and Taiwan, it's the parallel that exists between Russia and Ukraine. That America funded a bunch of neo-Nazis, overthrew the government of Ukraine, started a war in Ukraine, right? And then, and America's going to try to do the same thing here, right? They're going to try to arm Taiwan, start a whole thing, start a war, and force China to intervene, and thereby start a proxy war and justify to the illiterate dumbass populace that, oh, this is justified for us to go and have a serious conflict with China over this piece of land that was always theirs in the first place. Like, China will not accept an American military base right here. And to believe that they should is asinine. Like, no way. Like, absolutely not. Full stop. Like, China will not allow America to turn Taiwan into an unsinkable aircraft carrier off its coast. And they are absolutely correct in that position. And to believe anything else is like Nazi level hysteria. That absolutely not. Full stop. That if America starts to put real military hardware on Taiwan and provoke China, and China takes Taiwan by military force, they are right to do so. Fully. And any other position is just crazed lunacy. Just nut job. We're the Americans. We get to spread democracy wherever we go. We're going to go in there and clear out the Chinese from that place right there. That's what we're going to do. You bet we are. That's what that is. And nothing else. It's not rational. It's not logical. It's not empathetic. It's not compassionate. It has nothing to do with being smart or intelligent. It has everything to do with transferring wealth away from the working class of America into the hands of arms dealers. That's all that is. Because the only thing that's profitable in America anymore is just dropping bombs on people. That's all America does now. It doesn't do anything else. It shuffles assets around. It has a financialization economy that's basically nothing. That's essentially worthless. That provides nothing of value to anyone. And they produce munitions to drop on defenseless countries. That's what America does. And nothing else. So this idea that we should allow this raving, crazed, manic lunatic, the United States, to come over to an island off our coast and put a military base on it is insipid. Babyish. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Full stop. Should North Korea be allowed to reclaim South Korea because of U.S. intervention within a war that never... What the fuck? A war that never happened? What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck? North Korea was leveled, dude. The Americans leveled North Korea to the ground, rubble. Should North Korea be allowed to reclaim South Korea? Look, the relations between North and South Korea need to be resolved between North and South Korea. And they're trying to do it. And that's the long and short of it. And do you know what business it is of ours? Not at all. Fuck all. That's what that is. That we need to fuck off, leave those two countries alone, and allow them to discuss between each other how the process of reunification should look. Because, and even more beautifully, if you ask me, they are actually trying to do it. Like, North Korea is not gearing up a war to go down into South Korea and blow it up. That's not what they're trying to do. And also, South Korea is not trying to do the same to North Korea. That there are tensions, obviously, but the only thing that could make the situation worse for them is if the Americans showed up again. Because that's the reason that whole thing happened. It's because the Americans showed up, and with the very clear-throated statement, like, the Americans were not, they didn't hide this. They didn't pretend like what they were doing was anything other than going in to, quote-unquote, staunch the spread of communism. It's why they leveled North Korea. It's why they claimed South Korea for itself and turned it into a vassal state. It's why they leveled Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Right? It's why they committed a genocide in Indonesia. It's the reason why they've gone into this region and just absolutely blown the shit out of it to, quote unquote, staunch the spread of communism. The reason why this situation exists is not because the North Koreans want to do a war. It exists because the Americans want to murder communists. They explicitly say so. Like, we've straight out got Nixon on record saying we should just drop a nuke on these guys, and Kissinger trying to talk them out of it. Like, these people are crazed, manic, psychopathic lunatics whose objective is to murder people because they want to share. Leave these places alone. Go away. Stop participating. After the Chinese Civil War, the nationalist government, Kuomintang, retreated to Taiwan. The KMT had been the ruling government of China before the Communist Party's victory. Yeah. Like, Taiwan is part of China. It always has been. This narrative that says that Taiwan has always been its own independent state and all that kind of stuff, like, nah, it's lunacy. And if the Taiwanese were to stand up and declare their independence and then allow American military base on it, the Chinese would take it, and they would be right to do so. Like, and I said it before, I'll say it again. To believe anything else is absolute craziness. Like, I just think you're totally out to lunch. If you actually think that, like, yeah, America can put an airbase right here, and that's normal. China should accept that. That's a normal thing that China should accept. No. They really, really fucking shouldn't. Like, America has proven itself to be a Nazi-level, crazed lunatic threat on the world stage. Like, do we need to go through the list? Like, do we really have to talk about Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan? Do we really have to talk about Yugoslavia? Do we really need to talk about Venezuela? Do we really need to talk about South America? Do we really need to talk about the 5 coups the American government did in Africa just last year? Like, America is a Nazi-level rogue state, and nothing else. It is a huge manic psychopath. And to treat it like anything else at this point is just to put the blinders on, or just be like, USA all the way. Like, the rest of the world regards the American flag and the Nazi flag as the same. And they are absolutely correct to do so. So, yeah. No one should ever accept a fucking military base on Taiwan. Like, imagine if the fucking Nazis were trying to put a fucking military base on Taiwan. You think China would just accept that? Yeah, John, I was told the USA are the good guys. They always do things that brought peace across the globe. Yeah, that's the history of the United States. Peace, for sure. The US will not allow Korea to unite. I mean, we'll see. It's interesting, right? Like, funnily enough, of all people, Donald Trump, when he was in office, North and South Korea released a statement, a joint statement, saying, we are trying to find a way to politically reunify with one another, to work this out, and we would really appreciate it if we were left alone. Very specifically, America, fuck off. And the Trump administration's official position was, oh yeah, okay. That's actually what their position really was. So, at least the Trump administration, and I haven't seen the Biden administration do anything to upset that, but at least the Trump administration was like, great. Yeah, we'll fuck off. So, I don't quite... I mean, honestly, if you ask me, it is North Korea has nukes now. Like that is kind of what it is now. And the leadership of North Korea has been rattling that saber for a while now. And America, one of the things that we have seen pretty consistently from America is that if you rattle a nuke in their face, they'll back off. So they're just like a bully on a playground, right? If you start rattling, like if you start convincing them that, like, yeah, maybe you'll come over here and maybe you'll win, but you'll lose a finger, like, that's not insignificant. And when does everybody remember the not false flag, but the false event, the air raid sirens going, that happened in Hawaii? Everybody remember that happened? That was 100% a moment where North Korea was like, yeah, we could hit that. Like, this is why when we start getting into the nuclear conversation, like, even the most depraved, crazed lunatic is going to step down from that. And the reason why they're going to step down from that is because they don't want to go down in history as the one that started the fucking nuclear conflict. Like, they don't want to be the one whose legacy is to be... Like, none of these guys want to be remembered as psychos. Like, they want the statue. They want the big parades. They want to be thought of the way that, like, Washington is thought of, right? Like, they don't want to go down in history as this, like, abomination. And so getting entangled with a state that has nuclear weapons, especially a state like North Korea, like, what does it actually benefit America to try to go in here and fuck them up? Like, outside of the whole staunch the flow of communism narrative, but I'm sorry, kind of a failure to launch, guys. Like, staunch the flow of communism, eh? Funny how the same people lost their mind over the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah, exactly. And everybody in America is, like, completely understandable. You will not find a single voice in America that will be like, yeah, that's fine. Why shouldn't we let Russian missiles on Cuba? Because it's perfectly understandable why that's unacceptable. Right? Like, even I, somebody who is against the imperial United States, am sitting here saying, like, yeah, no, that's dumb. No, that's not only bad for the United States, that's bad for Russia, but it's also bad for Cuba. So it's bad for everybody, right? You just don't want this situation to exist. Just get rid of it. If someone settles in 6 tiles with me in Civ, I don't wipe them out. You don't, Santora? That's 100% what I do. I'm actually playing a beautiful game of Civ right now where I'm building a trading empire as Portugal. It's nice. Poland has gone to war with me, but my city is really, really well protected. Like, it's got a one tile approach, so I've just got an archer and city walls, and I'm just like pork. It's fine. And then the rest of my empire is, like, behind it. So I just need to focus on my navy right now, make sure my navy is strong. So if they start to try to attack me via the ocean, but that's fine because I'm a naval empire. So hope it's gonna work. It's gonna be a good game. I want to get. I'm doing it on a huge map, so I'm gonna get. Forgot that. So it's the opposite. Oh, because I read it. If someone settles in 6 tiles with me in Civ, I don't wipe them out. Is what I read. But you put that comment in there, it's like, yeah, if somebody settles within 6 tiles with me in Civ, I fucking wipe them out. Well, and sometimes you're playing a Civ where it's like that's your shtick. Like, if you're playing as Macedonia, you're going to war. Like, you're going to war. You're not going to not go to war if you're not Macedonia, right? It's just what it is. What 5 coups the U.S. did last year? They did 5 coups in African states. I don't know the African states offhand, dude. I can't give it to you. I can't like rapid fire that for you. But I'm actually sure that you could Google that. Like I'm sure that you could. I bet you I could find that out pretty fast. Like it's not like the Empire hides this stuff, right? Like which African countries did America coup in 20? Come on, dude. 2022. Yeah, straight up, dude. Like, Google is literally like... list of coups and coup attempts since 2010. Bro. Straight up. They're not hiding it. It's right here in front of your face. You literally just need somebody to be like, I don't want to sift through this. Yeah. We have a coup d'etat in Burkina Faso. There was a coup attempt in Malian. Our military, the BBC, our military takeovers on the rise in Africa. When is a coup a coup? Go away. Has identified over 200 such attempts in Africa since the 50s. How often are there coups? Like, coups dropped to around 2 a year in the 2 decades up to 1990. Oh, well, great. Only 2 coup attempts in Africa. Yeah. Last year there were 5 attempts. Although only 2 succeeded. Okay. I'll clarify my position. 5 coup attempts. So, slightly better. Slightly better. This is what's so fucking crazy to me about all this. Is that it's all right in front of you. Like, it's all... As soon as you stop engaging with it passively, right? As soon as you stop allowing it to just be TikTok videos washing over you, as soon as you stop allowing it to just be YouTube videos that just pop up on your feed, as soon as you stop just, like, letting it be the corporate media that just passively washes through you, and you actually begin engaging with it in an active way, it's all right there. It's not hidden, right? It is hidden in a way, but it literally is just like 2 plates, and the CIA just going, huh? And that's it. Like, that's it. And the second you go, hey, what's on that other plate? Then they go, wow. And it's all there. Like, it's all there. Like, I literally found this out by typing in, like, coups in Africa 2013. Blanc. Right there. It's amazing how often that happens. Like, it's really amazing how often that happens. I love this one. Sailor Moon, or Soviet Moon, I should say. I'm down for it. Did Marcus Smith fuck off? Yeah, I think he fucked off. I think he was tired of hearing the facts. Or maybe he's sitting back and listening in. I shouldn't disparage a man like Marcus Smith, right? We're all trying to learn. We're all trying to figure it out. And Marcus was actually a very nice man. Like, he wasn't being mean about it. He was wrong, but he wasn't being mean about it. I got to tell you, I really appreciate that. So Marcus, if you're out there, if you're just sitting back and listening, I hope you're doing well out there, bud. But this was a nice way to come in with your stuff. Oh, Marcus Smith. No, I don't want you to fuck off, Marcus. I just said a bunch of nice stuff about you. It was very nice what you were saying. You're beautiful. I'm trying to say something nice. Look, Marcus, I'm tired and I'm sleepy, okay? Tired and I'm sleepy. I appreciate it, bud. I appreciate it. I appreciate it, dude. I'm just like, I kind of have like a PTSD from last night, you know? I just feel like the TikTok guys are the worst. And I gotta be honest, I gotta be honest, it's starting to affect the way that I'm talking to like regular people. Not like people, not normies out in the world, but like you guys. It is starting to like, I feel like my patience is thinner. And I wish that wasn't true. I wish that my patience was stronger. I wish that I had more resilience. Because, like, because you guys, like, when you push back and you do that kind of stuff, like, you're very nice about it, and it's very good, and then we figure it out and all that, and that's lovely. It's these TikTok people that come in with their dick out, and they're just like, name one place where communism has ever worked ever, and you're just like, dude, really? Like, we're still here? Oh shit! I thought the place grew up a little bit. Oh yeah, don't worry about it, Marcus. You're great. You're great, dude. Yeah, Canada is America's lapdog for sure. Chat GPT can't handle U.S.-China Taiwan relations. It's contradicting itself all over the place, almost like the propaganda is competing with reality. I think that the worst thing that they've done with this Chat GPT and what they're going to do with all of this stuff is they're just not going to let it read things. They're just not going to give it the information. That's all. And it tells you that. It's like, I'm not connected to the internet. It says that straight out. I'm not connected to the internet. I get my information from a database. And it's like, oh, okay. And then you start probing the database and you realize pretty quickly, it's like, oh, you don't know anything. Like, you don't actually know anything. And if you don't know anything, well, then what do you know? Oh, you know all the Nazi propaganda, though. Like, you know all the Nazi propaganda. Oh, interesting. Eric says, this is the number one reason I give credence to Putin when he literally makes a statement of how untrustworthy the NATO alliance is and should not let them move to their border. I mean, yeah. Like, nobody should allow NATO even close to it. Like, like Libya alone. Straight up, like, ignore everything else and just Libya alone. And it's like, we're done. Like, no, not interested in you as an organization. I disagree with you. There are some lunatics like Azov something who made an argument that, oh, that's true, actually. Adam something did do that. There's a narrative of having a limited nuclear war is fine. Yeah. I just think that those are the types of people who will never actually get power. And a person like Adam something, he's doing it for the clicks. Like, that's all. Like, if you don't have a moral compass, if you don't actually have your feet planted on the ground, then everything you do is just for personal self-gain, right? And you're not trying to alter the consciousness of people, and you're not trying to do stuff. You're just trying to get as much attention as you can. And what's a great way to get attention is to make controversial statements, to say big controversial stuff, is to wade into controversy. Right, that's essentially what our culture is doing right now. Like, I mean, you take a look at, like, we talk about Velma, right? Velma seems to be the big controversy now in the creative space, and it's the reason why they did that. Like, they didn't do that thinking like, yeah, this is a good continuation of this. They did it because it was controversial. Yeah, it's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one, Marie. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, and yet they want to say that 2014, it isn't a coup for reasons. Yeah. Yeah, there's a coup attempt going on right now in Peru. That's right. Yeah, Velma came out right in time for the French protests. That's true. That's fairly typical, right? Like, it's fairly typical that, like, something big happens internationally and then the society hyper-focuses on something else, right? That's pretty normal. The one that was the most shocking, like the thing that will really make, it was very stark, is that the imagination of the American public was captured by the Ukraine war. Because I do think that the Ukraine war was like a big, like it it was troublesome for white America because Americans basically are fine with war as long as it's against brown people. But a war against white people, yeah, whoa, right? Like it's like 9/11 in that it's like, oh no, it's happening to us, right? Yeah, that's right, Anemone. I think that's right. And I had a point, oh yeah, and so America was really caught up in that, and the imagination of America was really there, and there was a lot of rah Ukraine, right? The Slava Ukraine, and changing all of the icons to Ukrainian flags and all this kind of stuff, and it was just like wave the flag and oh my god, and send as much money as you can, and it's totally fine to censor people on the internet all of a sudden, right? So much for the free speech guys, right? But like. It all went away. It went away instantly, overnight, because Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Right? Will Smith slapped Chris Rock off on the Oscars and slapped the Ukrainian war off the news cycle. It was like a weird little shock therapy, where like. If it suddenly came out that Will Smith was told by the CIA to slap Chris Rock and that it was staged, I would just be like, absolutely. I would believe that in a second. I wouldn't put any like I want to see the document. Like I want the smoking gun to talk about it as if it is a historical event, as if it is a fact, like MK Ultra, but like. I need to see, like, but if I did, like, if I saw the document, I'd be like, yeah. And I would just immediately move on. I wouldn't have, like, a, whoa, mind blown kind of moment. I would literally be like, oh, okay, great. So, Will Smith and Chris Rock are both CIA assets working for the CIA, and they agreed to stage this event specifically to do shock therapy on the society to move away from the Ukraine war. Got it. Because it's exactly what happened. Like, it's exactly what happened. And everybody just sort of forgot about the Ukraine war and then started talking about other shit. And suddenly we're just like, oh yeah, Hollywood. Right? It's wild. And so they do that shit all the time. They do that shit all the time. I can't bring myself to watch Velma. Oh, here's a piece of good news for people who know me. I'm really happy about it. Justin Roiland has been fired from Rick and Morty. If you don't know, Justin Roiland was the voice of both Rick and Morty, and also a co-creator of Rick and Morty. And it came out that he was a pedophile, basically. Isn't it great how everyone's a pedophile these days? I wish that we were still living in a world where, like, the scandals were just, like, a murder or something. Like, it's just... why is everybody a pedophile all of a sudden? Anyway. Like, when the scandal started coming out with Justin Roiland, it was like, oh, Justin Roiland going through a domestic abuse a scandal. Right? And when I heard that initially, I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. But, you know, I've actually known plenty of couples who have gone through, like, domestic abuse scandals and gotten the police involved and all this kind of stuff. Like, I've seen it actually happen. And it was a part of them working things out as a couple together. Like, and I know people who, like, literally, like, one of them did community service over it. And but they came back and they figured it was part of their growth together as a couple. And like why are you hitting people? Like, why are you, like, what do you need to do with that? And like, and in a way, it was actually quite beautiful to see that happen. And so when it first started to come out, I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. But, you know, I've seen this, like, the domestic struggle happens a lot. Like, it's pretty common. And so that's happening to Justin Roiland. And, oh, man, I hope that doesn't blow the whole thing up. And, oh my goodness. And then people started to leak some of the conversations that he was having with underage girls. Like 15, 16-year-old girls. And I was like, yeah, dude, you're not walking back from this one. Like, you're not, like, I think that you can walk back from domestic abuse. Like, I think that you can do that. And I think that there have been lots of examples of people who have done that. But I don't think you get to walk back from, like, hey, I had a creepy, weird conversation with an underage girl online. Like, nah, bro, I think it's over. And so, the whole time I was sitting here being like, oh no, I really like Rick and Morty. Like, Rick and Morty is a great show. It's some of the best television right now. And so they dumped Justin Roiland, and they're like, we're gonna recast. We're gonna get a new Rick and a new Morty. And I'm like, I still don't quite know how to feel about it, because, like, we've got 6 seasons with Justin Roiland, right? And I don't want to support, like, you guys know me, I'm always talking about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. I'm always like, fuck you, right? But I'm so very curious to see what a recast will do to the show. Because if it continues being excellent, then it's like, oh, it was always Dan Harmon, right? That, like, Justin Roiland was sort of there as like a creative type involved in the process, but Dan Harmon was the actual heart of the show. So I still don't. I'm gonna watch it. I'm not gonna lie to myself. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm not gonna bullshit. I'm still gonna watch it. I'm still gonna put Rick and Morty on. I'm still gonna watch season 7. And I'm just extremely curious to see if it messes with it. By the way, I know Bartmuth ain't fallen yet, but good lord, the Ukrainian government is literally committing a genocide. There's a casualty ratio of 1 to 8. Yeah, I mean, what they are committing to, it's like a self-flagellation. It's like a self-suicide. And, like, the thing that really surprises me the most... No, it really doesn't surprise me. Like, the fascists have taken over. Like, the Nazis have taken over. And this is what the Nazis want. The Nazis want to build, like, a perpetual, never-ending war. Right? This is the society that the Nazis want. And should Zelensky or anybody start committing to diplomacy, they'll just kill them. Right? Like, this is sort of a horror show that's going on in Ukraine, is that there is no diplomatic solution. It's not going to happen, because what is happening is what the Nazis want. They want a perpetual, never-ending war against a force who they deem to be inferior than them. And so this humiliation that they're experiencing is just a way to self-affirm this. Like, how dare these inferior subclass people strike back against us? We'll show them. And so they're always in this perpetual state of humiliation-fueled vengeance that's not going to end. Like, that's the thing that's crazy about it. It's not going to end. Like, they're not going to suddenly be like, yeah, let's diplomacy. They're not going to do that. It's not what Nazis do. It's not how they operate. Like, the Hitler Nazis only stopped because Hitler shot himself. That the Soviets and the Americans basically just, that was the end of that. Like, and unless something similar happens in Ukraine, yeah, I saw this video actually. The right-hand man of Zelensky is no longer in government came out and said they're not going to win the war. Yeah, like, they cannot logistically win this war. It's just not possible. I don't know who Dan Schneider is. Who's Dan Schneider? Dude, they're all pedos at this point. Like, until they actually, like, start laying charges and releasing the lists and all that kind of stuff, we just have to assume that anyone in the, like, we got to assume that, like, Doge Cat is involved in this shit. Like, we have to. We've got no alternative. Like, they're all involved in this weird little pedophile cult. It's interesting that Chris Rock hasn't decided to sue Will Smith for that incident. Yeah, it is actually. That's true. I mean, I don't know, though. Like, if I'm Chris Rock, I'm like, do I really want to drag Will Smith through this? Like, they're both millionaires. Like, what does Chris Rock really have to gain? Like, if I wanted to play devil's advocate, that's basically what I would say. I'd be like, what does Chris Rock really have to gain? You know, doesn't seem to be like a big. He doesn't seem very very incentivized to carry on with that, and like, if I'm Chris Rock, like, Chris Rock gained a lot from that event, right? Like, he gained a lot of cred. He the next special he releases is going to be the biggest special in America, because he's going to talk about that story, right? Like, I think that Chris Rock is playing it pretty. He's getting the gains where they're good to get. That he doesn't need to get the gain. Like, let's stop playing devil's advocate and start playing, like, okay, why would he not sue and why would he do, like, because his gains are going to be in the culture selling the story. That's his gain. And he doesn't need to make the gains in a court of law, right? He can make the gains culturally. And so if the CIA were to approach Chris Rock with this idea and say to him, yeah, think about it, Will Smith winning an Academy Award that night is going to come up and slap you on stage in front of America. What do you think that's going to do for your next special? And Chris Rock's going to be like, yeah, that's a real good point. I mean, that's a real good point. And the thing that convinces me more than anything else is that when Will Smith walked up to Chris Rock and slapped him, he leaned into it, right? He leans into it. Do you guys remember this? Will Smith slaps Chris Rock. You just type in Will Smith and it's the very next thing. We don't need the audio because my audio is kind of fucked up. Are they actually going to show it? See how he's leaning in, right? See how he's leaning into it? And, okay, so, like, this is the whole event. This is the whole thing. I love this. This is great. I'm going to slow it down. We're going to slow this right down. Playback speed. Super slow. As slow as we can make it, right? Look at Rock. Look at him. Here he is. Standing, hands behind his back. Here comes Will Smith. He leans right in, but he's kind of leaning in like with a little bow. He takes a bit of a step forward, right? He's leaning right in, hands behind his back. Everything about this kind of says, and he starts to, like, it just looks like he was ready for it the whole time. Just the whole event kind of says to me, Chris Rock was ready for this slap, knew it was coming, was prepared for it, had his line ready. Will Smith slapped. I forget what he said, but Will Smith just slapped the shit out of me. Yeah, I'm not. Let's see the after effect, though, because the after effect is really what matters. That's true, actually. I just realized, because, like, the lead up before, like, he's just standing there, hands out, right? How genuinely, like, Chris Rock's not that good of an actor. How genuinely convinced am I that, like, Chris Rock is actually surprised by this? Because clearly the slap didn't hurt. You know what, though? It's this moment that goes the other way for me, though. Because while he leans in, I remember this now while I saw it. While he does lean in, it's this moment that really convinces me. Because I think at this point, everybody thought that this was kind of a joke. Right? The crowd is still laughing. And everybody's... And Chris Rock's smiling. And then he does this, where he says the don't... And then... Keep my wife's name right out of your mouth, fucking mouth. Yeah. And then it's that sort of like sense of humiliation, right? Like that Rock doesn't really know what to do. Right? So I'm all over the place on this one. Yeah, and let's be very clear, Marcus. Right now, it's worth restating, we here at the Canadian Commie do not abide by conspiracy theories. We like factual documentation, things that are real, things that can be proven and shown to be factual. But if it did come out, I would believe it. Like, I would immediately be like, yep. I wouldn't. So, and I've got a couple of things that are like that. Like, I have suspicions, but I'm not going to, like, stake my claim on it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that really, I'm putting my whole thing, I'm pushing all the chips on it. No. But I'll float an idea. I'm happy to float an idea. I will say that I've given more thought about my local community and how most businesses are locally owned. I don't see the same labor value extraction from our town. Yeah, because when you get down to like a rural or a community level, it's harder to justify the extraction, right? Because you like live with these people. Yeah, I don't see how communism works at macro scale. Well, the idea behind it and what they were doing in the Soviet Union was, so imagine you have like your commune, and that commune is, let's say, your town, right? So you got one town, and that's a commune, right? Or let's say you have a couple of councils, which are essentially guilds, right? Workers' councils or unions, right? And those exist, and then they come to a consensus with one another about what they would like to see done. And then they have a representative body that exists above them. And then that connects in. And you have everybody's doing this, right? So everybody is ruling by consensus and sending the information upwards to be collected into a larger communal body, which itself elects an executive branch, right? That's basically how the Soviet Union was structured. It's sort of how the Chinese system is structured as well. But it's the idea that your own community would be making its decisions locally, for the most part, right? And then should there be a federal need, like the Nazis are attacking, right? Then you have an agile institution. Wouldn't this be susceptible to rampant local... Oh no. Sorry, guys. Wouldn't this be susceptible to rampant local corruption? Like, in what way? Like how? Like, what would you be expecting to see? Because, like, when I think rampant corruption, I think lobbying. Like, lobbying, like, corporate lobbying is... And, I mean, obviously there's always going to be corrupt bureaucrats. Like, you can never get away from this idea that, like, how do I get more for myself? Like, I think that's just a very human thing. The question is whether or not the corruption is built into the system purposefully or not. But, like... So yeah, like, what would you be expecting to see? Like, what does a bribe look like in a structure like this? where you don't have corporate power structures, you don't have lobbying groups and think tanks, there's no billionaire class. The like so corruption is like, I have power in this branch of government that has the ability to get something done over in this small area of the institution. And if you want me to actually do that thing for you or to expedite this, then I'll take a bribe. Right? I feel like that's like the most normal form of corruption that exists. And one that I don't know that you'll ever truly get out of. Like the question is whether or not the system itself is incentivizing corruption or not. Like that's the bigger question. That like, if your goal is to completely eradicate corruption, then it's like war on terror. You'll just be in an endless war, right? And like, obviously you shouldn't let corruption run rampant, but like, realistically, like, there's going to be degrees of corruption no matter what. And but like, you take a look at the American system of where lobbying has been built into the fabric of the structure, and you see how it comes in degrees, right? That if I had to give a choice between like this idea of like some local council member taking a small bribe in order to push a piece of legislation one way or the other versus like billion-dollar corporations literally owning politicians through campaign finance, like, it's just a very different beast, right? And like, yeah, corruption exists everywhere. Good to see you, Vince. All political conditions. Talking about being factual, are you interested to play a 20-minute long video where it demonstrates how disinformation gets spread in the society, but in this specific context, it's about COVID? No, it's too late in the evening, dude. I'm actually thinking I'm going to shut this one down early, honestly. I'm fairly tired. And how many viewers we got right now? I saw 6? 8? 11? Wow. Isn't that great? That was like quantum entanglement or something right there, where it's like, as long as you're not looking at it, it's this number. But the moment you look at this, it's a different number entirely. In good news, Justin Trudeau swarmed by angry protesters demanding he resigned. I don't really want to play videos, dude. Like, I just don't want to. I'm not really that keen about it. Put that in the Discord though. I might check it out on Discord. You know what? I am going to shut it down early. I'm tired. I'm going to move on. Maybe go to bed. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Yeah, hello, good night. Oh no. Don't even worry about it, Marcus. I'm glad that you're here, Marcus. I really am. Alright, good luck. We're gonna need it.